Hey guys, welcome back to the WOD Doc Project 365, episode 405. Yesterday what we did was define what made something a glute dominant squat versus making it a quad dominant squat. Today what we're going to do is look at two faults and see how they can be robbing our glute dominant squat and turning them into a little bit more of a quad dominant squat, and how we could possibly be getting overuse, over stress injuries from too much glute, or too much quad activation, I should say, right? So if I was to first look at this, remember yesterday what we said is that glutes are hip extenders, right? So the more hip flexion that we get, the more activation of the glute that we can get through the squat. So I want to have a lot of hip flexion, all right, in comparison to the amount of knee flexion that I'm going to have. That's going to allow me to contract the most glute, or activate the most glute, activate the most glute tissue. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a look at what I would consider the standard for this glute activation, or this glute dominant squat, I should say, right? So if I'm right here and I use this little man-made goniometer to look at my torso angle right here, this would be the standard. So we could say that any time that I lose hip flexion, I'm going to lose a little bit of glute activation. Something's got to take over for that, so I'm going to gain quad activation when that happens, all right? So here's what's going to happen. The first fault that I want to talk about is lack of ankle mobility. When people have lack of ankle mobility, what tends to happen is they come like this, right? Obviously, this is an over-dramatized position, but you can imagine what happened. My torso stayed in relatively the same place because I need to center the weight over top of my body. So what I do when my knees come forward is I lose hip flexion. When I lose hip flexion, I lose glute activation. Something's got to take over, quads take over, and it turns into a more quad dominant squat just by going up onto my toes a little bit more, right? The second thing that we're going to talk about is that awful butt wink that everybody has, or everybody talks about. When we talk about the butt wink, remember we're going to start back into this position, which we're going to call our standard position. It's not standard for everyone. This is my standard one, right? So if I go into the butt wink position, what happens right here is, although it might look that I have that initial same amount of flexion because I end at the top at the same spot, you can really see, if you look down at that angle, that what I'm actually doing is losing hip flexion right there. So again, in this case, loss of hip flexion means that loss of glute activation, because I can't extend the hip as much. Something's got to take over for that. Quads are there. I got more knee flexion than hip flexion. I'm going to have a glute dominant squat, or I'm going to recruit more quad. I back that up. I'm going to have a quad dominant squat, or at least I'm going to have more recruitment of quad than I initially would have had in that perfect position, okay? Guys, I hope this helps you out. It's two things to look at. It's two things that's robbing glute activation in our glute dominant squat, or what should be our glute dominant squat. Until tomorrow, I'll talk to you guys. Well, until tomorrow, guys, we're optimizing function to optimize.